Hi, I'm Dr. Paige Gardiner, and welcome to Political Science at Ensign College. I'm excited to teach you today, and hopefully over the weekend you enjoyed reading about immigration. We're on the fourth unit of our class this semester. So Unit 1, we looked at states and regimes. Unit 2, we looked at institutions. And Unit 3, we looked at actors. Now we're finally looking at policies. You can remember back on week 2 of the semester when we did some subject matter immersion, and I allowed you students to pick the topics you wanted to learn. As a class, we voted to look at 4 policies. The first policy you voted to look at was immigration. So I'm excited to talk about immigration today, and then we'll be moving on to the other 3 that you voted on as a class, which were healthcare and climate change and education. So let's get started. I'm going to share my slides with you today. Hopefully you can still see them and see me. So we're going to talk about immigration, and hopefully over the weekend you read 4 or 5 publications about immigration policy in the US. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and start shouting out how immigration impacts the US, and I'm going to write some of your answers on the board. And while I do that, I'm going to also put up a PowerPoint slide that may summarize some of the things that you read about. So thanks for shouting out some of the things you read about. Maybe you see them up here on the slide. One of them is, how does immigration impact the economy and jobs in the US? How does immigration impact healthcare? Is it a drain on our healthcare system, as immigrants have no insurance and we want to take care of them, so then they go to ERs and we take care of them? How does immigration impact our borders? Here we have a picture of President Trump, and he's at the border. You may have also read about immigrants who take a really long time to become naturalized and how difficult that process is for them. You may have also read about how in College Park, Maryland, they're now encouraging, and maybe they're moving towards a system where they'll have illegal immigrants voting in their local elections. So thanks for helping me write on the board a list of all of the impacts immigration has on US policy. So I want to start also today by thinking about this quote from President Bush. And as you know, I like to share different perspectives from different political actors in most of our lectures. So President Bush said this: America's elected representatives have a duty to regulate who comes in and when. In meeting this responsibility, it helps to remember that America's immigrant history made us who we are. Amid all the complications of policy, may we never forget that immigration is a blessing and a strength. We as Americans value immigration because most of us have a heritage where we have immigrants who came from different countries. Whether that was Europe or Asia or South America, we can recognize that this is a really important issue to most Americans. So we listed out a wide variety of policies that immigration impacts. Today, I want to focus on one specific policy. This policy is called the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival. In 2012, President Barack Obama created this policy, and what it did was it stopped the deportation of children who had been brought to America as illegal immigrants and who were raised here. It gave them a 2-year period for them to work on becoming a citizen. They were given work visas. In some places they were given eligibility to go to school and driver's licenses. However, the policy did not pave a pathway to citizenship. Something interesting happened in 2017 when 9 attorney generals applied pressure to President Trump and asked him to stop the policy, which he did. However, special interest groups stepped up and they brought cases to the federal courts suing the US government, saying that the policy should be reversed. These 3 landmark cases were joined together in one single case, and it came before the Supreme Court this last fall in 2019. The US Supreme Court heard arguments on the case, and they should have a decision by the end of June. So this is the policy that I want us to really focus on today, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Think about maybe someone you went to school with who may have been an illegal immigrant, or who you go to school with now, or maybe someone you work with. How does this policy impact them? How does it impact you? How does it impact the school you went to or the place where you work? So this is the political framework we've been working with all semester. You know the essential elements of politics. First, to have a healthy democracy, we've got to have rules and civil rights. You've got to have elections. We need to have government institutions, that's the legislature. We need to have civil society, and we need the news and media. This framework also has important critical influences that interact and influence our framework. So things like the economy and technology, security, politics, interest groups, geopolitics, and our demographics and race. So with thinking about the immigration policy we're looking at today, I've put on this slide a few elements of critical influences. So for example, how does having children who've lived in America their whole life, who've grown up here and are going to school, how does that influence our economy? How do these same children influence Silicon Valley? What does Silicon Valley think about them staying or being deported? What do Trump and Biden think about this issue? And how will that influence the upcoming presidential election? Or how do the political parties spin or use this as a way to bring voters out to vote for either Trump or Biden? Next, how does the Department of Homeland Security keep us safe? And what do they think about this policy? How do political norms and cultures, for example, the Me Too movement or the killing of George Floyd or COVID, now that we have these big issues on the horizon, has it impacted how people think about immigration, or has it made the immigration policies less relevant to Americans? How do companies view sending children back to their natural countries? I also want you to think about it from a geographic standpoint. If you live in states who border heavy immigration pathways, how does that influence the state policies? And lastly, what do people in the news and media think about sending children back to their countries? So far in class, we started by immersing ourselves in immigration policy by reading news articles before we came to class. Now what we've done is we've integrated immigration policy on top of the framework that we've been studying all semester. The next step of class is we're going to do an interactive activity. So let's move on to that. Let's get in your groups, and you'll see that I've assigned each of our 6 teams in class an area where I want you to research how the DACA policy is influencing our essential elements of politics. So each team is given an assignment here, and I've kind of given you a heads up on what you need to research. So let me review. Example, if I'm team 1, we're going to get together as a team and use our laptops and cell phones, and we're going to look at how this policy is being perceived in the economics of the US. Economically, are we for or against this policy? What are the pros and cons, and who are the major players? So now I'm going to give every team about 10 minutes to do research and to come up with 2 or 3 items of pros and cons for each of these critical influences. Okay, I'm going to leave the slide up here so every team can review their assignment, and I'll walk around while you're Googling or researching and answer any questions that you might have. At the end of those 10 minutes, we'll come back together as a class and we'll teach each other what you learned about this important immigration policy. So after the class comes together and we review the data, I want to end by talking about this. The nature of human dynamics does not change from level to level. President Obama acknowledges that the way power works at every level, whether at the UN or in your neighborhood, is do you have a community that stands behind what you stand for? If you do, you'll have power. If you don't, you won't. Our purpose in this class is, 1, to help you become better informed, but most importantly is to help you know how to interact with your power source here. So you have a homework assignment, and here's the instructions. And please read over those on Canvas or ask me questions. I'll be available to answer in emails or meet with you after class if you need extra help. Lastly, I just want to close by saying that you have an opportunity here at Ensign College to interact with a lot of students, and I hope that you'll use your political influence for good. So I'm excited to finish talking about immigration, and I look forward to next class period when we'll move on to our next topic, climate change. Okay, I'll see you in the learning management system, or if you need any help, you can come to office hours.
Stop sharing. The red button.